I felt at times like everybody was looking at me. I feel like, it was like my trauma was me. I think when I look back and how it affected everything, I feel like I took it like that was my identity.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. Thank you for joining me. This podcast is a safe space for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault to share their stories and connect with others who've been through similar experiences. I believe that sharing our stories is one of the most important steps to healing, and my hope is that the SAS podcast will help victims and survivors feel less alone and more empowered. My goal is to provide you with insights, resources, and a supportive space where empathy, compassion, and understanding thrive. Your experiences matter, and my commitment is to being there for all my listeners every step of the way. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Podvlog studio in St. George, Utah, and I'm here each week to provide a platform for victims and survivors to tell their story and for experts and professionals to offer insights and information to help us all on our healing path and to provide an education on being trauma-informed in order to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. If you are a victim or a survivor, or if you know someone who is, or if you investigate, prosecute, treat, or interact in any way with victims or survivors of rape or sexual assault, I encourage you to listen to this podcast. Whatever your part is in this experience, you are not alone, and we are all here for each other. Thank you again for joining me. Welcome to a new episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. This is episode 61, and I'm thrilled to be back with a full episode after a week off, and I'm also thrilled that you've tuned into this particular episode because my guest this week is someone I'd been anxious to interview and whose episode I'm extremely honored and privileged to present to you. My guest is Ashleyann Garcia. She lives in Puerto Rico, and I've been communicating with Ashleyann since mid-August when she first reached out to me through Instagram Messenger. Ashleyann was writing to me in the middle of the night from her balcony while looking at the stars, which she says she does when she's had an emotionally difficult day and can't sleep. She had also just listened to this show, and particularly the episode with my daughter, Cache Barrera. Ashleyann told me that she had been inspired by Cache's story and was writing to me to let me know that she was hoping to someday be able to be on this show because she believes it's a pathway to healing and because she has a story similar to Cache's that she wanted to share. Almost 4 months have gone by, and Ashleyann told me just a couple of weeks ago that she was ready to tell her story. This is powerful stuff. Powerful because Ashleyann is a powerful person, struggling every day with her past as well as the present of raising her son, working a full-time job, and fighting the demons of her assaultive past. This episode is not only powerful, but inspirational. Let's get to it. Here's Ashleyann. Hey, SAS listeners, I'm really excited to have with us tonight Ashleyann Garcia. Welcome, Ashleyann. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you so much.
It's really an honor to have you. Ashleyann reached out to me through Instagram.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
It's been an interesting conversation that she started by telling me that she was having a hard time sleeping and had gone out after listening to my daughter Cache Barrera's episode. She went out and was looking at the stars and came and wrote a text to me, and I responded, and we've been communicating on and off through text, and then we had a phone conversation the other night, and she told me she definitely feels like she's ready to talk about her sexual assault experience. So, Ashleyann, why don't you start off, if you could, by telling us about yourself?
Well, I am native, born and raised in Puerto Rico. I am currently 32. I'll be 33 in December 19. I have a 4-year-old. Last almost 11 years, I lived in Texas. One of those years was in Chicago, Illinois. I've done whatever I had to do to survive every day by myself with not good company, with great company who I treasure to this day. And I came back to Puerto Rico last February after just needing additional emotional support and also having family to assist me with my child as well. Just to give you a background, a little bit affected by the whole trauma that I've been carrying since I was a child.
It's a long time to carry a
Yeah.
burden like this. So my heart goes out to you, and I'm so thankful that you're willing to talk to us. Ashleyann, what are you able to tell us about your sexual assault experience?
I think I'm gonna start saying that for the longest since I remember, I wasn't really sure if I was sexually abused or not, or if I imagined. I was so confused because it did seem real. I think it did happen around when I was like maybe 8 years old. I can't remember exactly how old I was or how long it lasted, but I was always worried that I was crazy, that I imagined that that happened because I couldn't believe that I was the only one that noticed at the time that that had happened. I was alone with it and continue to be living with that secret, I would call it, maybe till I was, I don't know, maybe 20, 23 years old, when maybe I probably, told a partner I had at a time, which I would say when you're sexually abused, and I know we can talk about this a little bit later on, but not for everybody, but I tend to feel so much sadness, and I wanted to help everybody that crossed my path and nurture them and make them feel good. I looked okay on the outside. I was always good at school. I graduated with a bachelor as well. I always studied by myself since elementary school, and it was that time where I could like not show to others my skills, but maybe to myself. So it's a little bit hard because I started my healing journey not too long ago. I've heard many of the episodes on the podcast, and many people started doing that when COVID hit. I would say I started seeking help when COVID hit, but I'm just going to go to the beginning. I come from a family very, very small. My dad is adopted, and his dad died when he was like 4 years old. We used to live with his adoptive mom. There was no one from that side of the family, no cousins, no like aunts or anything. So we only had my mom's side of the family, which it was also relatively small. So I really didn't have like too much escape, or maybe other people that weren't there all the time that didn't notice. No one's gonna be looking for that.
Yeah.
I think I was so alert when that happened that I was just always shocked because I started looking and looking and looking more at adult men. And the thing is that this happened with my grandfather from my mom's side. So my mom's father, I used to clean houses with my grandma. She's still alive. He passed away. He died. So I always felt like I never got closure or I was able to confront him. I mourned that for a long time because I feel like I deserved it. I went to his funeral. I traveled from Texas. I cried so much that night, not because of him. And I remember my ex telling me, oh, you should forgive him and move on. Because with every relationship I had, even if it was friends or even my own parents, my other family members, and everybody, I would want to have control of certain things. I would be the impulsive one or the explosive one. And I will always hear my own family tell me, oh, we can't tell you anything because it's an outburst. You can't control or you just say hurtful things. I learned to be more and more quiet. Anything I was feeling was dismissed. Started when I was like around 8 years old. We used to stay there a lot because my mom was very close. Everybody was like super close. I mean, we didn't have any other family And I used to go with my grandmother to clean houses. I'm pretty sure he studied the timings. When will we wake up? When would I go shower and stuff like that? My grandma is one of those ladies that likes to be in the neighborhood with her friends, sitting outside, just chatting and all of that. So she used to do that a lot. But when I would stay there for the weekend to clean a couple houses during the weekend, when since little, I was very independent and I liked having like that money for candy. So I would stay there, and after staying and not going with her to her neighbor house, he started going upstairs. I was not locking the door or anything like that because why would I think that, that's gonna happen? And I would say it was just me and him at that point and my grandma because probably my brother, I have one brother, like 2 years younger than me. I say like because I have trouble with memory a lot.
Mm.
So I do forget a lot of things, like the key, the phone. I could be driving and forget what was I going out for. I dissociate. And I know I don't have like a lot of good pronunciation with like English words. My native is Spanish, but I'm pretty sure everybody understands what I mean when we just zoned out, when
Yeah.
you try not to think about anything, but you still think about stuff. And one thing leads to another. I've had panic attacks driving where I have to like stop and breathe or call someone. And this all started coming out, I would say, since that COVID, because when you don't really heal or look for help and you spend so long, so many years of your life just wearing that mask, I always felt like I was never able to be myself. So I try to accommodate my personality to different types of people just to blend in or not make anybody upset. So I was always kind of careful. He would, I remember what I believe was the first time that I was watching some TV in that room where all the cousins or grandkids would stay for summer parties or, at the end of the dinner, oh yeah, please, can we stay? We will do that. But like I said, when I was, staying with her sometimes 1 week or 2 weeks in a row during summer, I started noticing that he would go more upstairs and start like placing his hand over my shoulder. And it was usually like the same thing. I don't think there's much details to go on to. There's like some stuff, but not too explicit. I don't think, and I said I don't think because I don't remember too much. But I would say, there was no penetration or anything like that. But it was terrible because it's like I would freeze, literally, looking out the window, screaming inside, just wanting out and not understanding why or why me, or if it's me and there's someone else, should I say something or shouldn't I say something because they're not going to believe me, and I think most of that, you know, when you're a kid, you're supposed to like go to that person, parent figure, adult, whoever that you feel protected. But I think that I would talk about my Hispanic heritage, Latin community here in Puerto Rico. It's a lot of like, oh, boys don't cry, or, a lot of really not letting you be yourself, and a lot of falling like sit down or they're gonna break things, and you grow up kind of scared. So for something so big that happened to me, I feel like, I just, who the hell am I gonna tell? Like I didn't feel like it just, I had a great relationship with my mom. Like she was my best friend and everything. We are building that relationship now because although I haven't spoken to her, I'm pretty sure it has been rough for her because it was her father. And she knows. So, it's a long story, but kind of like to keep it moving. After the hand being like placed on the shoulder and kind of like maybe telling me things like, oh, nothing is wrong. I'm not gonna hurt you or anything like that. And it was kind of like, kissing my neck and stuff like that, which are things that could trigger me in my adulthood because it just, it's uncomfortable, maybe it's area. So I think that's something that sticks with you in your body. And if, like I said, if you don't work it, it's just gonna be there. So yeah, so it was the neck, and then it was like sitting me on his lap, and I could feel the whole thing or whatever. Like I mentioned before, I wouldn't say there was like penetration or anything because I could say I'm 100% sure. Maybe at some other point in my life that comes to, something else might come up because yes, I have experienced that a lot in the last few years, things that I remembered that I that I forgot about since they happened. For example, maybe like 2 months ago, I remember I used to watch through the window when he would go to take out the trash. And as a kid, I wouldn't also know how to stop going to do the cleaning. Like, what excuse am I gonna? I start overthinking, and to this day, I overthink way too much. And that also affects my day-to-day activities, responsibilities, all of my relationships, me being a mom as well. So I'm trying to breathe before anything that I have to do, like any task, because it overwhelms me to the point where I feel like relapse to I'm not like good enough, or why do I keep like getting so overwhelmed by tasks that if I just, grab the phone and call, it's done. So I have to do like a lot of preparing for a lot of things. I do suffer with like chronic depression, so and anxiety. I remember a couple of years of my life in Texas when I ended up that abusive relationship also that I was with that person. At that time, the partner I was dating, that we were together for almost 3 years. I think he was the first person I told, but it was also kind of like, oh, I'm sorry, whatever. But we were just, again, it was someone who had a troubled childhood, and I think I had a magnet for that as well. I was seeking like fixing something other than myself. I think I did mention when we spoke that I graduated from university here in 2013 here in Puerto Rico, and I always like my first pick was being a psychologist. I think I studied myself a lot throughout the years at certain degree. I would say I raised myself because I was in my mind 24/7. I had nightmares, the same nightmares. Well, the same nightmare for years, and I couldn't understand what was it. So I've been having trouble sleeping since maybe middle school. I would say when like MySpace was like big before Facebook, and you had all kinds of chat. So I used to like wait when I was at home, like with my friends and my brother and my adopted grandma. She was the love of my life. I would wait for them to go to sleep so I can do something to disconnect from the day, because not only he was a family member, I spent the rest of my life visiting him like nothing. So I would go on Saturdays. My mom was crazy about them both. Everybody's crazy about my grandma. She's 80. I've been taking her to like, appointments and stuff, and just enjoying the now. I am back home with her, but he's not here because before I couldn't do it. I always had to like put that mask on and just pretend like nothing and be like, hey, how are you? Ask for the blessing, which is something that we do here, or Hispanics do, which is you say bendición, and people would, family members, whatever, say God bless you. Calling throughout the years, I disconnected myself when I went, when I lived in Texas. I didn't care to call anybody here. I did visit, but I just wanted to go to the beach. eat some food I didn't had in a long time. But I was always asked to like, oh, let's go visit so you can see them. And there was always comments like, oh, you look a little bit more like voluminous this time, things like that. And when I said I was like observant when I was growing up, what I meant is that I knew who he was, and I saw him looking at every family female member I had, and I never said anything. It's so much.
I really am sorry for the experience that you've been through. And it sounds to me like you have expressed some things that are so common among victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault, and you live
Mhm.
that trauma still.
Yeah, it does take years because not only like we were mentioning, like the neighbor, it did affect me a lot because, even just having intercourse with someone, it's a little bit hard. It's not that you get used to, but you get to learn. And I think when you seek treatment, like when you have it controlled and you're taking care of yourself, that smell that remembers him or whatever, it's not gonna affect me like it did maybe 3 years ago. Because when I will smell that white rice that he used to make, and it's crazy because I know what makes it smell like that because it has happened to me. And it's like putting a lot of oil and a lot of salt if you're making white rice. And I remember him preparing it like that. So if by mistake I do that, it triggers the hell out of me. And it's like dinner is freaking ruined. Why is he on my mind right now? Like I didn't ask for this. So it's very hard, and you do take many years to like grasp it, to put it in perspective, like it's not real, it's not happening anymore. You can be calm, it's just a smell, or if you don't want to eat it, just throw it away and go to a drive-through. So I have learned to like also stand my ground and be more vocal because I felt like keeping quiet was the best thing I could do at a time, because in my child mind, like I just wanted to protect my family because it was small and I didn't want it to cause anybody no chaos, because I mean, everyone's gonna fight now. Maybe they will believe me, but he's gonna probably go to jail. I didn't know better when I was that age.
Yeah.
So another I had a couple of like sexual assaults in my life too. I don't know if it was at the same time that that was happening to him. He would just kind of like knock on door and, wait for me to get out of the restroom and open the door. It's gonna be quick and don't say anything. I would go to the kitchen and he would grab me. I would sneak out and go grab cereal, but he would come back like quick, and then, still caught me there, and I had to like beg for him to let me pass or let me go. Like, it got to the point where I didn't want that anymore, and I wanted him to stop. But it kind of like continued for a little bit, and then I remember, like I say, cousins will stay there. I would say molested by a cousin. I don't know his story. I don't know anything, but it was like the game of like, oh, you kind of want to, play mom and dad era while we play hide and seek. So there was like more touching and kissing and stuff. That I don't remember either how long it lasted. I would say it was just a couple of times, nothing like our grandfather, my grandfather, which I called him dad for so long, but now I have accepted that I don't need to call him like that. I don't even say his name. I don't like it. I spend so much time saying it to be on the norm, to not bring anything suspicious about why I might not be,
Yeah.
because I didn't want it to make anybody suffer. So the cussing thing that ended, and one time, he would like stroke me like on top of him, everything, and always, I believe it was with clothes, but it was just, incest and everything, disgusting. I remember when I started therapy in 2021, That lady that was treating me, she told me and I think I'm never gonna forget it. First, that I was always carrying my wounded child everywhere I went because I was always feeling sorry for myself and the not feeling enough, not feeling accomplished. I feel like my parents always had a big expectation of me to do great things in life. And I was just so exhausted of putting on and off that mask that I just, I pretty much left with a person that was already being abusive to me, but it was my only escape to be out of here and not go to Christmas there and not go to his birthday and act normal. Because if I would have stayed, it was going to happen. I was going to probably, tell. So I decided to leave. And that was 2013. I lived with that person like one more year. We ended the relationship. I started working two jobs. One of those jobs was overnight. And I remember I had this guy tell me that he already saw my car and that he would like follow me because he wanted to go home with me. So all of those things constantly would trigger me and would leave me exhausted for weeks and months because I felt, and mind you, that when I ended that relationship, it was either come back here home or stay there and work two jobs somewhere where I didn't have anybody at all. So I decided to stay because I wanted to prove whatever I needed to prove to myself. And I always told myself that I could somehow heal myself without seeking professional help. I was just never, ever wanting to, maybe cry in front of someone and tell them what had happened to me or why I had why am I suicidal? Why sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I'm tired. I don't want to do this no more. So going back to the story, and I think I put myself in that position not of being followed or persecuted or wanting to take advantage of me or anything. But I chose to stay there, so I knew things like that would happen because I knew since very young that that is something so common for people to do to other people, sexual abuse or rape or whatever. So I remember I had to that same night just trust whoever look okay and be like, can you walk me to the car? I mean, this is happening and I'm scared, whatever. Yeah, I spent a lot of years alone, but also were years where I put everything on the back of my head so I could do my job, pay my bills, survive, eat, because I knew if I wasn't focused or just being depressed, that I could either end my life or I don't know, because I didn't want it to come over here. So I always acted like everything was okay. So I usually, I don't like being left alone. I think like every grandparent, every grandfather might do something to their grandkids. You never know. And I never trust anybody. And now having a kid, I was going to be more scared of it, but I think even though it was something terrible that happened to me, I feel like so prepared that there's no one better than me to be there for my son because as we all know, it's just not only women who go through this, it's everybody. And then just at another job, I remember I had a supervisor who called me to tell me something, and in front of everybody, he sat me on his lap. And I remember immediately I told my ex, my son's dad, and he was like, you have to go to human resources like now. So I did that. They kind of like made me do report and explain and it's kind of like the same thing. I never reported my assaults before, but if you kind of like pause for a second and think about it too much, you're not probably telling the truth. Like if you are, say I'm with HR, whatever, I'm trying to, document and they ask me, oh, what happened, how was it, what did he do, etc. And sometimes when you pause in situations like this, when you have to like get courage from nowhere, since that thing just happened,
Yeah.
and it's frustrating because he had other like reports for kind of like the same thing, but he was still working there. I always thought to myself that it's always been handled terribly wrong. And I think it's going to take a long time for it to be right for us.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how they don't comprehend, like I said, when and this wasn't my case, but I couldn't imagine like people that go tell and they're not believed. They're told to like go away, or so like you said, it's different for everybody, but um, yeah, it affects you. I would say, and I'm not ashamed to say, it affects with your eating. I think I always struggle with eating disorders because I was feeling always so down when I was not in school. I would say that I would wait for the hunger to pass. Like I just didn't have the energy to shoot, maybe. I could be days on end in bed. Well, obviously, when I didn't have my son, now it's different. It takes a different type of strength that just comes naturally. But yeah, forgetfulness, memory loss, social anxiety, like it was so bad. I didn't deserve. I feel like I didn't deserve going to certain stores because I always felt like I was less. And that seems stupid, but to me, it was a big deal. I wanted to like go everywhere, in and out. I felt at times like everybody was looking at me. I feel like, it was like my trauma was me. I think when I look back and how it affected everything, I feel like I took it like that was my identity.
Yeah.
And I at times I cry out of anger or frustration because I feel like I remember saying so many times, I don't know who I am. Like what am I supposed to do? Like what's my purpose? Like why do these things keep happening to me? And little things like, for example, not being appreciated at a job, for an example, will trigger me because it took so much for me. Not that it's the other person's problem, but it took so much from me to just wake up that day and do a 8-hour shift, if that's the case, without dying. We'll say like, oh my God, I'm dying, like not literally, but you know, yeah, like I said, another thing that I want to also mention, that I discovered and accepted, and I was a little bit ashamed of it, when I was in my teenage years and like in my 20s, when the abuse happened and stuff, and I don't think I told how it stopped, so I'm gonna tell that real quick. And I remember one time I obviously had enough. My body had enough. My mind had enough. Um, I was about to explode. And I remember seeing my grandma this time going to take the trash out. And obviously, it was coming at me. It was the usual, like, even if it was like 5 minutes. And I remember he was touching me from behind. That was his thing. So that's another trigger for me. And I remember seeing my grandma like walking away and walking away, and I was fighting. I remember in my mind, is this the moment to like break free? If he fights it, then she's gonna obviously know. But if he doesn't fight it, well, let's see what happens. So I turned around and I told him, I don't want you to do this anymore. And if you don't stop, I'm going to tell her once she's back. It ended. We never, ever. ever spoke ever again. And I think that's one of the things that marked me. Like it really, um, I don't know. I don't know what word to use because I didn't live my life at all. I feel like I was always with him on my mind 24/7. I remember having that dream when I didn't like go to sleep right away. When I was going to bed, like in my house with my parents and my brother. And other than like already having that like insomnia, it was also me avoiding not to go to sleep because I knew that was gonna happen again. And for years, until I started that therapy in 2021, that's how long it took me to understand that it was him coming at me on that dream. But I couldn't tell because it was all shadows in a dark room. And it came with a sound, a particular sound that I'm telling that to you right now and I can hear it in my head. And it was those dreams where you can wake up like you would just wanna be hugged by someone, but you just can't move. And I think that happened daily. And I would say that was after it stopped. Maybe because it wasn't happening, somehow the body, was still reacting to it. So it was bringing it up through a nightmare that destroyed my mental health
Yeah.
because it was so scary. And there was never a face either. And I didn't know what was. It was me like sitting on a chair, like I knew it was me, but I couldn't see me. And it was like the light that comes through, like the crack of the door when opening. And it was just a big black shadow that would like get closer and the closer get to me, the closer the sound would be. The crazy thing about it all is that, and I know I did mention, because there's this other part of the story that I found out less than a year and a half ago, and is that one of his daughters, who is my aunt, she went through that before I even existed, but she never said anything either. So I ended up flying to Philadelphia like a year ago, and we talked, and now I understand, so many things. And I say it's crazy because she told me she hears still that sound too. What's that sound? I am not sure. So yeah. In when I started that therapy, one of the things I did, because I never got the chance to like confront him or say anything, to like write him a letter and just put everything I wanted and then read it out loud in the therapy session. And like I said, once you enter that healing journey, it's scary. It makes you wonder if you should go through it or not, at least in my case, because it brings stuff more and more when you're alone or when you smell something or and I have this thing that I still go through it because even though now my family knows, I'm never gonna tell my grandmother. I mean, she's 80. Why would I do that? I don't think I have any business there, and I wouldn't do that to her. She's an angel. I am always gonna assume that she never knew anything, didn't have a clue. Yeah, it sticks with you. It affects everything. It affects your communication with others because you don't have the patience, you don't have the time. You just want to, throw your view or your point and just get out. I spent a lot of my years just being angry. I will snap at anybody, mostly people that were close to me. because even though I did isolated myself for a very long time, and I only had like a few friends here and there, and I was the type of person to like do plans and then I didn't want it to, but I never knew I was depressed. And I was like, oh, so why would you agree if then you're not gonna do it? And it just kind of like nothing ever made sense to me. Like I didn't know how to fight with everything at the same time. Like just having that experience with me for so long and growing up, going to college and then moving out and still hearing about him. I remember I was on a group chat where they would like send pictures of him. Then he was sick, and I never asked. I never called my grandma to nothing. I was so ready for him to go, kind of,
Yeah.
but I was kind of like suffering at the same time for my mom because she did find out very little before, and she didn't even have the chance to confront him either because when she flew from Texas, when she found out, because I used to have a lot of crisis and episodes where I will be angry and I will just cuss and yell, and I couldn't like calm down, and I just I was all over the place. I couldn't think before talking at all. I would just say whatever was on my mind. I didn't care who I heard or anything like that. So I was just so confused. I feel like I never knew how to navigate the trauma. I never worked it until like what, maybe when I was 30 years old
Yeah.
after having my son. So yeah, I'm still kind of like finding myself because I feel like my entire life was just kind of like devoted to that sadness, trauma,
Hmm.
and horrible thing I went through and no one saw anything.
Yeah. Ashleyann, you said that for the longest time you were withdrawn and quiet and didn't want people to know that you even existed because in your mind you
Hmm.
were like damaged goods.
Yes, I was like, yeah, I'm super broken. Like, who the hell? Like, I'm not gonna. How am I gonna be like hopeless? So hopeless. Like, I was like, you know,
Right. How old were you, or what stage in all this did it start coming out in anger where you, like you just said, you started, snapping at people no matter what they said? There was no talking to you because you were confrontive and you were angry, and you let all of this anger out and you'd cuss and all these things. When did that start? And when did you go from the quiet to this angry outburst person?
it really started when I started dating at 16. I feel like that gave me a little bit of power of doing whatever I wanted. I was always, my parents were strict at all. So it wasn't like, no, you're not gonna stay or at your friend's house, which also was a very traumatizing thing for me. I had good friends, but I was always so scared of like the male figure in the house. I was like, yeah, if this person did this to me, who says he's not gonna do it to me or look at me in a certain way? So I could never relax when I stayed at friend's house that had their dad present like I did, in my house and
Yeah.
still have, they're still together. Um, so I would say, yeah, like when I started dating, I started being a little bit more free. I got a car. I always worked, always. So I will pay my own car, my own phone bill. So I got that kind of permission from my parents to stay out a little bit later and things like that. And I think also the anger came from having relationship with men because every little thing they would do that wasn't to my expectations being like, I mean, if I'm gonna share my time and myself with somebody, it better be for good. Because I didn't want it to go through like that, but it's normal. Not with the first person that you ever meet, you're gonna end up for the rest of your life. So I always knew that, but I started building up anger. Like, for example, I can go see you today. And I would like snap, like, oh, but why? And it was just maybe I wanted to get out of the house, and that was my escape that day. I didn't want it to be home. Maybe, whatever. I don't have plans now, so I have to stay home with my thoughts again. Go into the room, put the same like songs or whatever, and then forget about it. Go to bed. Maybe have the nightmare, maybe not. Oh, I haven't had it in so long. So it was always like kind of wondering what would happen next, really. So I think the anger came from not really knowing what was going to happen because I was also not organized either, making me forget things. And, I would get mad. And when I started college, that was like the moment first of all, I enjoyed what I studied and I did good, but I also felt free because I study a little bit far from home at the time. The car that I had was good, and now I was going out all the time, until 3 in the morning, 4, 5, 6, 7 a.m. And, will tell my parents to F up if they told me something. I felt like after when I started college, I was like done with everybody, even if they knew or not knew. I was like done. I didn't want to take anything from anybody. It's been very crazy because, for example, today I went pick up some lab work from my grandmother and went drop it off to her, but there's a picture frames and there's a chair he used to sit on. And I asked her for her insurance card so I could take a picture in case I needed it for like some documents she gave me to help her fill out. And she had already showed me the picture, but she has like his picture of him being young on her little wallet, look like the plasticky things we used to use before. And like she showed him to me today again. And I'm kind of used to it not reacting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been pretty hard. Sometimes I say I'm gonna go visit her and I bail. I don't go because I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
I don't want to see nothing. I don't want to be there.
You talked just a little bit about having an ex. So you did get married, I take it, at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, 8 years together. Yeah.
and that had to have been difficult also because of your past and how that impacted your relationship with him. Are you able to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think this is a little bit more sensitive because it's so fresh. We've been separated since February when I got here. I met him in 2016. At that moment, I remember I returned. I think I returned from Chicago. My behavior after university forward until I met my ex in 2016. And I know this might sound bad, but I didn't say it earlier because I always jump from one thing to another. That is very common
Mm-hmm.
with trauma too. I've read
Sure.
about it a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm also learning to like take pauses because I always wanted to say everything like all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I always was made fun like, oh, you don't breathe. And it's just I feel like I was so unheard and so not understood, and just dismissed that I even if it was I saw a butterfly or whatever, I just go into this story that might end up being not about the butterfly. And that caused me being insecure as well because sometimes I did not know how to behave, like what to talk about or how to react to others' conversation, or maybe I couldn't relate because my mind wasn't there. So I think that it has been a lot of like adapting through everything that I have experienced so far in my life. What that therapist told me, and I agreed with her, and I don't know, I guess I'm just ashamed, and maybe someone might have went through the same thing, but I got to a certain point where I was also very promiscuous. I still don't understand why that would happen with such a complex, big trauma where I grew up saying, oh, I'm not gonna be with anyone until I get married. I don't want to have anybody like touch me or anything like that. But I guess it just comes with also, in my case, just being able to finally feel free at some point when I was in college that I went for everything. I didn't really care if I knew the person or not. I sometimes ask myself, how the hell am I alive? I was in Texas just, existing. At some points, I was like, I just feel like I'm floating, like nothing affects me. If I was with this guy maybe today and in 2 weeks with another person and never saw him again, like it wouldn't bother me at all. I knew it wasn't right, but I guess it was just, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think I did get an explanation from my therapist, but I honestly can't remember. I'm just saying it's crazy to me that with my experience, I was able to go through that, which I think that added more trauma to my relationship, which was a very meaningful and serious because then every single touch was bothering me. And this is a person I really wanted to be and work it out. And I think it kind of all started there where I didn't want to like be with him. We made up excuses like, oh, I'm so tired, have a headache, or I don't feel good, or, just to like not have intimacy with him. So one thing led to the other, and that's when I finally told him what has happened to me and why I was reacting like that. I think I came down to my senses that I needed to heal to be able to make this relationship work if that's what my heart really wanted. So we started having problems. Him, obviously, and I told you that, and I'm not gonna go too much into detail, but he is amazing. And since the day I met him, the day I told him, and to this day, and I called him before starting, like I always do, because he's just my big supporter. But yeah, it just kind of like he started asking me to go seek help. I remember maybe like around 2017, after a year of us dating. And I was like, no, I can handle it myself. I was just in this denial stage. I don't know why I couldn't get out of there. I didn't want it to go. I was like, I feel like at a certain point, and he knows that, and I feel like at a certain point, I kind of like hurted him also because I trusted him so much, and he was so supportive that I threw my shit just on him during most of our years together. He kept insisting, I kept denying to go. So eventually, we didn't have like intimacy at all. We stopped communicating. I then had my son, and he told me now is the time because he's gonna suffer if you don't do this now. So I was like, oh yeah, let me convince myself that I would do it at some point, but it was never the time to go seek help, and it was a little bit contrary. How was that?
Contradictory.
Uh yes, because I'm like, I studied social work, I've done casework, I know how this works, I know it's needed. It's not only doing yoga, writing, maybe I do need the medication, maybe not. And I also was so against medication that I think that's why I was also avoiding going to therapy because I was telling myself always, and that's just so naive to think, but I always told myself, oh, if you look for help, it's just like What about everything you went through? You know, you were so strong and now you're gonna seek help. It was just something so weird. I don't know. I couldn't accept that I was not gonna be better if I didn't do that. So I did. I had my son. I had the most horrible thing I think any women can have, and that's postpartum depression combined with everything. Another thing, I always trick myself. I think I did a lot of tricking myself to go over everything that came up to my mind because I would think about everything. I would not be there, but I already would think like maybe what things he will say, what will he say about my clothes? So I was, preparing on my way there while everybody, might be happy and excited to, share a meal or whatever, open presents, whatever the case might be. So I was tricking myself all the time and kind of like guiding myself all the time, telling myself what to do. And that really took a lot of my energy, causing exhaustion, more insomnia, the not sleeping and being so tired and wired would definitely give me anger issues. So it was like a bomb. I didn't want to hear my son cry. We had a hard time also in our relationship because me wanting to be so isolated and not be involved in too many social gatherings, we started going out and we were only working and caring for our son, working and caring for our son. And I didn't have anybody there. Mind you, I was living in Texas. No one ever from my family moved there. So it was me when I met him, let's say in 2016, we're in 2021. I better do this now because I can't stand my son crying. I am so exhausted. I'm falling asleep sitting down. He's working. I didn't have time for anything, and that aggravated the situation, our relationship, my depression, my anxiety. I went and started therapy. I got put on medication. I've always been very bad at taking medication also. Again, I forget. Sometimes I take it. I go take a shower, start talking with my mom or whoever, and then I'm like, did I take the medication? I don't remember. And I go to bed without it because I don't want to amp the dose, but I never knew if I took it. Driving is like I will take exits just because I go into just my own mind. And if I'm being triggered for whatever reason, I call myself. My exit taught me that trick and I think it works. He always tells me to like stand up, stretch, put my chest forward, breathe in and out, those type of exercise. If you breathe in and out 5 times, it calms you and kind of gives you clarity. I lived always fast forward. I was always very crazy about having everybody to do everything quick. Like I was always in a hurry because that anxiety and that depression just caused me to overthink, not only overthink, which I know I have said a lot of times, but start creating scenarios that I don't know if they're going to happen. So I kind of ruined a lot of experience for myself that I should have enjoyed throughout my stages growing up because I didn't know how to relax, how to be comfortable in my own body. We used to go to the beach, and until this day, I just feel like I'm doing something wrong if I get into the water without two piece. It's a little bit traumatizing because I had to live that with him by my side. Many of the times I enjoy things as a kid, he was there. So to this day, I still struggle with feeling comfortable with my body because he also commented so many times on it when I also traveled, already being married and everything. Not having my child, he never got to meet him, which I'm very grateful for. But my relationship with my ex just got to a point where I could not be talked to. I hated sounds. I wanted to be alone. I started skipping work so much. I have to ask him to skip work for me because I didn't want it to be alone. We suffer financially a lot because of that. I feel like it was like that drought that it keeps hitting in the same place and end up making a hole. So we communicate daily. We support each other daily. He knows everything. He knows me. I know him, and we're doing this co-parenting thing and the helping each other because we also came to the conclusion reason why I think we're so close because he also went through childhood trauma and his support is like little to none. So I've also been his support, even though I carry a lot on my plate. I would say I thankfully I've always been very empathetic and I also always been I would say a big advocate for talking about things like this now that I obviously I'm older and I'm right now like I'm not, obviously not in Texas doing therapy here now in Puerto Rico, but one of the things needed to be done was seek therapy, continue with the therapy because now I was gonna see myself with my son only. You know, we're separated, so he wanted to make sure that I am controlled and capable of handling everything that a toddler, like a child, throws at you when you're dealing with so much unhealed trauma. I can't say I really have much support because even though like I mentioned that aunt of mine who was his daughter and he abused when she was very small, but she lived with him. So that was hell for her as well. I think it did connected us because she never knew anything about me until like a year and a half. She learned to forgive him because she thought that he changed and because he was her adopted dad. I guess she felt like she owed it to him in a way. I remember I was having so many anxiety attacks, even with my stepkids, like driving with my stepdaughter. Like I would be like, hey, they already knew. I opened up to them because I know how terrible it is, and I wanted them to be prepared, obviously with his dad permission. But we did have the talk of your dad and I are going through this. This is my story. This is what happened. I just want you all to trust, be safe out there, know that you can tell me because it's not going to do you no good if you stay quiet. I know it when you're small or teenager, even adult, you don't tell it because you're scared. But if you don't do it, it's just gonna mess up your life until you decide to deal with it. Because no one can heal that part of you if it's not you putting in the work.
Ashleyann, I really appreciate you being willing to talk about some of those dynamics because I know it's obvious that it's still impacting you and is touching you even as you talk about it in ways that are somewhat uncomfortable. But I also think that talking about it is part of that healing process. And what I'm gathering, it's a process for you that you are still going through in this healing journey that you are confronting every single day the work that needs to be done. You talk about how hard that work is, not only working a job, but working the work of healing and reliving a lot of these traumas. And you have to confront each aspect of that trauma and work your way through it. And that's exhausting in and of itself. But you seem to have the drive to keep going. And I guess in wrapping all this up, I really would like for you to talk a little bit, if you're able to, about how you see things evolving and how this process of even coming on this show and talking about your trauma is going to impact your future and what you're anticipating and hoping for out of all of this.
I would say that, first of all, because I was so very detailed and deep in trust with my son's dad, it got to a point where I suffocated him with my struggle to a point where in the relationship, I couldn't see anything else but my suffering, that exhaustion, that being tired. I think me coming here on the show is part of me just going through another step to go further in my healing journey and just tell the world what I believe more in is just to say it. And if someone doesn't believe you, just keep going until someone does. And it's going to be traumatic and terrible. And it's going to probably feel like the worst thing that is happening to you at the moment. Or you're going to wonder, like me, maybe I didn't ever do it, but like, oh, if I do it, it's going to go to jail or something. Might as well that happen because that should be what needs to happen. Tell and share the podcast even more. It helped me so much since that first time I heard it. And again, the work is the work, and it will probably continue for a lifetime. Maybe. I don't know what to expect. I do know I have to drive, like you said, and my son is just my inspiration and my motor to keep going because I know how rough could it be out there, and I know he could also be a victim, and I don't want that to happen to him. Just be that voice that it's okay to share, nothing to be ashamed of.
Ashleyann, what will you do when we are finished talking to do the things that you need to do for your own well-being? How will you take care of yourself? How will you deal with a lot of these emotions that are now right at the surface? And how will you take care of yourself so that you can move forward?
I can say right now I don't feel nothing major. I think I'll be okay. I feel relieved in a way because I feel like this is the first time ever that I can tell someone else that is trauma informed and knows what I'm talking about. And I'm pretty sure everybody that listens to this will also. So what I will do after is I'll probably just call my ex and just kind of like share the experience. And I know he'll tell me, I did good and it was the best thing, and just ask me how I am feeling and if I need anything. I'll probably just listen to some music that takes me out of those negative thoughts or memories that might start coming after, we finish this. So music and just kind of like now laying next to my son, looking at him until I fall asleep. And I think just taking this as feeling so proud of myself. I was able to do it. That I think that alone will be my inspiration to just be okay for the next few days, weeks, and the future.
That is a great thing to look forward to and to, yes, definitely be proud of. I hope you listen to your own episode a lot because it is a strong episode. It is amazing that you have realized the importance of doing what you just did, and that is coming on this show, confronting your past, acknowledging the pain and the trauma, and realizing that you can move on. I think that's so inspirational to so many of the listeners that listen to this show. There's something huge to be proud of.
Yeah, I think so, because having no hope to live, being able to let so many people hear you, I think it's just, it's a powerful move for me and everybody who has done it and whoever hasn't done it because they don't want to or they're not ready. I think it's a great opportunity to work more on yourself and take it as another experience. If you had so many bad experiences, taking this from a community that has the same maybe knowledge that as you experience. And it's always good to let it out and leave it somewhere else.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a huge part of this. And I really am anticipating that you and I will stay in touch. And I'm hopeful that somewhere in the future that you would be willing to come back on the show again and tell us how things have progressed for you and see where you're at. Ashleyann, thank you.
Thank you so much. I am always forever going to be so grateful for this.
Well, I know I am too. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I want to let Ashleyann know that I'm extremely proud of the great job she did in sharing her story with my audience. I'm impressed with Ashleyann's courage and perseverance in pursuing healing, and I hope you'll all join me in expressing your encouragement to Ashleyann, and that you'll do so by leaving her your personal message in the comments section of this episode. Don't forget to tune in next week when I'll be bringing you another episode of Strength and Resilience in Pursuit of Healing from Rape. I'd also like to renew my invitation to those of you who are listening who've been raped or sexually assaulted and feel that you're ready to tell your story on this podcast in order to further your own healing process or help others with guideposts as they navigate their way on their healing journey. Just email me at davemarkel@gmail.com. That's DAVEMARKEL@gmail.com, and we'll talk about the possibility of you being on this show. And also, don't forget to start by believing. It's a way to personally do your part in bringing justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault, because we all know someone whose life has been affected by rape or sexual assault. Thanks again for tuning in. Please tell everyone you know about this podcast. It's a great way to help the podcast grow. We'll see you next week.